I never thought I'd be sitting here, pouring out my story in a subreddit. But after everything that happened, I figured maybe someone out there has been through something similar and can tell me what the hell I should do next. My wife, Lisa, and I had been together for over 10 years. We had a good life, or so I thought. 2 kids, a nice house, a decent job for me, and her working part-time from home. It all seemed solid until it was. It started with small things. She'd be late sometimes, claiming she was at the spa, but I'd hear her laugh quietly on the phone at odd hours. Not enough to raise a real flag, but enough to leave a niggling doubt. She'd come back fresh, with her skin glowing and her perfume lingering. I told myself I was paranoid. Maybe I was just overthinking. Then last week, everything exploded. We had a planned family vacation. It was supposed to be relaxing, a break from the grind. We stayed at this nice resort near the coast. Lisa insisted she'd be at a spa retreat for 3 days. I believed her, mostly because it was a convenient excuse. And she'd been talking about this getaway for months. The night we arrived, I was exhausted from the drive. I decided to check out the hotel room just to unpack and settle in. When I opened the door, I saw her. Lisa, half naked, tangled up with her brother's best friend, Mark. They were caught mid-kiss, and the look on her face froze me in place. My stomach dropped through the floor. My mind went blank for a second, then everything else kicked in, angry, hurt, confused. They saw me immediately. Her cheeks went red and Mark's eyes widened. "Shit," she whispered, trying to cover herself. Mark looked like he'd seen a ghost. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I think I just stood there, unable to speak or move, while they scrambled to pull apart. "Was that?" I managed to rasp out. My voice sounded distant, hollow. Lisa's eyes flickered with guilt and something else, panic. She tried to explain, but the words felt meaningless. I saw the physical evidence. Her lipstick smudged, her hair out of place, Mark's shirt half unbuttoned. All the signs of something that had been going on for longer than I'd imagined. I told them to get out, but I wasn't even sure what I was saying. My hands trembled. I kept looking at her, waiting for her to say something, to explain, but she just looked away. I couldn't breathe properly. My mind kept racing. How long had this been happening? What else had she lied about? How deep was the betrayal? I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stand there, numb. That night, I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what I'd just seen. Every detail kept replaying in my head. The scent of her perfume, the way Mark's hand trembled when he pulled away, her face twisted with guilt. I wondered if I'd missed the signs before, if there were other lies I hadn't caught. My stomach churned with a mix of fury and heartbreak. The next morning, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go. But I also knew I couldn't confront her without a plan. I needed to find out exactly how deep this went. Because once I knew everything, I'd decide what to do next. For now, I just needed to keep my cool and gather the evidence. I wanted to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. Not with violence, but with something cold and calculated. I started by searching her suitcase when she was out at the pool. Underneath her clothes, I found a hidden phone. It was an old one, probably from a burner, but I managed to turn it on. And there it was, messages. Flirty texts, secret conversations, plans for their next meeting. I scrolled through, my palms sweaty, my stomach twisting. Each word was like a knife. They'd been doing this for months, I realized. Months of lies, betrayal, stolen moments. I memorized what I saw. I wanted to be sure I wasn't jumping to conclusions. But deep down, I knew I'd uncovered a mountain of truth. This was just the tip of the iceberg. As I put the phone back, I felt my jaw tight. I'd been betrayed in the worst way possible. My mind kept circling. How could she do this? What did I do wrong? Or was it just her? I didn't know anymore. When she came back later, I greeted her with a cold stare. She looked at me with wide eyes, probably thinking I hadn't seen anything. I wanted to scream, to yell at her, but instead I kept my voice steady. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "And I mean really talk, not now but soon, and I want answers." She nodded, but I knew she was already planning her next move. That's when I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. It was about control, lies, and a plan I had yet to figure out. I had to decide how I was going to respond, because I wasn't going to let this go without a fight. I'd come up with a plan, one that would make her regret every lie, every betrayal, and I was ready to see it through. But first I needed to breathe, I needed to think. and I needed to prepare for what was coming next. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and honestly, I couldn't look at her the same way. The trust I had in Lisa was shattered beyond repair. Every time I saw her, her face flickered with guilt, and I could feel the weight of her lies pressing down on me. I knew I had to act, but I also knew I needed more evidence, something irrefutable, to make her understand that I wasn't just some naive fool. I was furious, and I was determined to get my revenge, but I had to be smart about it. The first step was to find out how long this had been going on. I went back to the phone I'd hidden in her suitcase. I knew I could never confront her directly without knowing the full extent. I started digging through her messages, and my stomach clenched when I saw conversations from months ago. They'd been sneaking around for a long time. I saw plans for secret meetups, flirtatious banter, and even some details about trips she'd taken for her spa retreat that I now knew were lies. They'd been lying to my face for almost half a year. I kept scrolling, feeling a mix of disgust and heartbreak. The worst part was realizing how good she'd been at hiding it. The subtle hints I'd missed, the little excuses she'd used, all made sense now. Every late night, every excuse about me time was a lie. I could feel my fists clenching as I looked at the screen. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what this meant for us. Was she planning to leave me? Had she already decided to cheat on me, then just kept it hidden? There was one thing I knew: this wasn't just about cheating. It was about control, deception, and the outright betrayal of the vows we made. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I needed something that hit her where it hurt, something that would make her regret her actions and remind her I wasn't stupid. I was angry enough to burn everything down if that's what it took. But I also knew I needed to be strategic. My first move was to gather physical evidence of the affair. I went through her belongings, carefully searching for anything that could serve as proof. Her diary, her hidden notes, anything. I found a few receipts, hotel keys, restaurant bills, things that proved she'd been sneaking off with Mark for a long time. But the big prize was that phone. I was going to use it to do something clever, something she'd never see coming. Over the next couple of days, I kept acting normal around her, but inside, my mind was working overtime. I decided I'd set a trap, an elaborate plan that would make her realize I knew everything and that I was ready to fight back. I took pictures of the receipts, copied the most revealing messages, and prepared myself for the confrontation that was inevitable. One afternoon, I asked her to sit down. "We need to talk," I said calmly, even though my heart was pounding like a drum in my chest. "And I mean really talk. No more hiding, no more lies. I've seen enough. I know what you've been doing." Her face went pale and she tried to protest. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, but I cut her off. "Save it, I already have the evidence. You've been sneaking around for months, lying about the spa retreat, and I found your secret phone. Don't bother denying it, I know everything." Her eyes flickered with panic. "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered. "It was a mistake, it didn't mean anything." I felt my jaw tight. A mistake. "You're cheating on me with my brother's best friend and you call it a mistake. That's bullshit. You've betrayed me in every way possible." She looked down, silent. I saw tears in her eyes, but I also saw the guilt that wouldn't let her face me. I realized I needed to show her I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I wanted to make her regret every second of this betrayal, so I started revealing my plan. I told her I'd been collecting everything, preparing to expose her to everyone, our friends, family, even her brother. "You want to lie and hide? Fine. But I'll make sure everyone knows what a liar you are. You'll be humiliated, and I'll leave you with nothing but your guilt." She begged me not to do that, but I knew I wouldn't be swayed. I had already decided that I'd take my revenge in a way that showed her she couldn't get away with this. No violence, no screaming. Just a quiet, calculated blow that would leave her knowing she'd crossed a line. I was ready to sit her down, show her the evidence, and end this chapter of my life with her knowing she'd lost everything. As I packed her bags for her spa retreat, I slipped the evidence into her suitcase. I wanted her to find it when she was alone, when she was most vulnerable. I wanted the pain to hit her hard, not just the betrayal, but the realization that I knew everything, that I was prepared to destroy her carefully built facade. I could feel my heart pounding with anticipation. This was going to be the moment she'd regret forever. My stomach twisted with a strange mixture of satisfaction and regret. I'd never wanted to be this person, but she pushed me to the edge. Sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to fight dirty, and I was just getting started. The day I finally executed my plan felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of fire. I was both nervous and strangely exhilarated. All the months of pent-up rage, heartbreak, and planning had led to this moment. I knew she'd find the evidence in her suitcase when she packed for her spa retreat, and I wanted her to see it. I wanted the look on her face, the mix of shock, guilt, and despair, to be burned into her memory forever. I kept my face neutral as I watched her unpack that morning. She was trying to act like everything was normal, but I saw the flicker of worry in her eyes. I had laid everything out: photos of receipts, copies of her secret messages, even a written note I'd made about the timeline. I'd left it all in her suitcase as a quiet, deadly gift. Today, she'd find out that I was no longer the naive husband she could lie to. She noticed the envelope I slid in the corner of her suitcase and hesitated. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and I saw her panic spike. "What's this?" she asked, voice trembling. "Just some things I wanted you to see," I replied coldly, watching her carefully. "Go ahead and open it." She looked at me, then slowly she unzipped her suitcase. Her hands shook as she sifted through the clothes, and then her fingers brushed against the edge of the envelope. When she pulled it out, her eyes widened. I saw the moment she realized what it was, and her breathing hitched. "You've been sneaking around for months," I said softly but firmly. "All those late nights, the secret messages, here, the proof. I collected everything. You lied to me about the spa retreat, but I knew better. And now I want you to understand that I'm done being blind." Her face crumpled as she stared at the evidence. She was speechless, trembling like a leaf. I saw her swallow hard and then whisper, "This isn't what it looks like." I shook my head. "No, Lisa, it's exactly what it looks like. You betrayed me in the worst way possible. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I do know I won't stay in this lie anymore. I want out. For good." Her eyes welled with tears. "Please don't do this. I made a mistake, I swear." "Save it," I cut her off. "You made a choice and I've made mine. I want a divorce. I want out of this nightmare." She started crying harder now, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she choked out. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. Please, I'll do anything to fix this." I stepped back, feeling the cold resolve settle in. "You should have thought about that before sneaking around behind my back for months. This is just about cheating. It's about respect, honesty, and loyalty. And you lost all of that the day you decided to betray me." I turned away, my heart pounding with a mix of relief and rage. That was the moment I knew I'd done what I needed to do. I was finally free of the suffocating lie she'd spun around us. But I also knew this wouldn't be the end of it. She wasn't going to give up without a fight, and I was prepared to make my next move. I grabbed the divorce papers I'd been drafting for weeks and handed her a pen. "Sign these," I said quietly, "and don't expect to come back into my life after this. You've burned that bridge." She looked at me, eyes red, trembling with despair. "Just give me a chance to explain. I can fix this." "No," I said firmly. "This is over. I'll be taking the kids and moving out today. You've crossed a line that I can't come back from. You chose your side and I've chosen mine." As she signed the papers, I felt a strange mix of liberation and emptiness. I'd finally taken control. My body was tense, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. I knew there would be fallout. She'd probably try to manipulate the situation, spin her story, maybe even try to guilt me into changing my mind. But I was done. I'd fought enough. The aftermath was inevitable. She called me several times that day, crying, begging, trying to explain. I didn't answer. I wanted her to understand that her lies had cost her everything. The kids would be with me for the foreseeable future, and I'd make sure they knew the truth when the time came. I'd start fresh, rebuild, and learn to trust again, although I doubted I'd ever trust her the same way. I handed over the keys to the house that evening, packed a bag, took the kids, and left her standing there, devastated. As I drove away, I felt an odd sense of closure. I had been betrayed, yes, but I was no longer a victim. I'd taken back control, and I'd learned that sometimes the only way to fight back is to take your power. My advice: trust your gut. Once you see the red flags, don't ignore them. Gather your evidence, be strategic, and never underestimate how much strength you have. Sometimes, revenge isn't about hurting others but about reclaiming your dignity. If someone crosses that line, don't be afraid to walk away and rewrite your story. The days after I handed over the divorce papers felt like walking through a fog. I was relieved, but also numb. Every moment I wasn't with the kids, I was replaying what had happened, trying to piece together how I'd let it get so far. Honestly, I'd always thought I'd be the one holding her accountable, but now I saw it's easy to turn a blind eye when you want everything to stay the same. That realization hit me hard. The house was eerily quiet without her. I can't say I missed her, not the woman she had become during all those secret months. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to move on, but I also knew I needed to do something about her. I couldn't just let her walk away without consequences. Not just for me, but for my own dignity. One thing I did was start planning how I'd tell the kids. I didn't want to break their world, but I knew they deserved the truth eventually. I kept it vague at first. Mom and Dad are taking a break, but I made it clear there was no chance of us getting back together. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to traumatize them. I promised myself I'd handle that with care when the time came. Meanwhile, Lisa kept calling me, begging for a chance to explain, to fix things. I ignored most of her messages, but one day she sent a long email. It was full of tears, apologies, and pleas for forgiveness. She told me she was sorry for everything, that she'd realized what she'd lost, that she'd never do it again. I read it and it made my stomach turn. Sorry doesn't cut it when she cheated for months and lied to my face. I responded once calmly but firmly. You made your choice. I don't want to hear your apologies. I've moved on. I knew I had to stay strong, even when every part of me wanted to lash out or go running back. That's what she expected, I think, but I refused to give her that satisfaction anymore. The real turning point came a week later. I'd been gathering my strength, thinking about the next steps. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, more than just the pain of losing a marriage, but also the consequence of betrayal. That's when I decided I'd do something that would really make her see what she'd lost, in a way that hit her right in the pride. I reached out to her brother, her family, and some mutual friends. I wanted them to know what I'd found, what she'd been hiding. I didn't want to do this out of revenge alone. I wanted her to understand that her lies had consequences, and that she'd crossed a line from which she couldn't come back. I was going to make sure her reputation took a hit, not to humiliate her more, but to show her that honesty and integrity matter. I told her brother the truth, about Mark, about her lies, about how long this had been going on. I explained I didn't want to destroy her, but I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. He was stunned, obviously. I could hear the anger in his voice when he called her later, warning her that everyone knew. The fallout was immediate. She called me in tears, furious, accusing me of betraying her secrets, but I cut her off. You betrayed me, Lisa, I said plainly. You lied to me for months. You cheated on me with someone I trusted. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth so they can see who you really are. She screamed, begged me to stop, but I didn't. The damage was done. Her reputation was crumbling faster than she could spin her stories. And honestly, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. No, not satisfaction, more like relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control. The chaos she tried to throw my way was backfiring on her. That's when I realized something else. I was done being the innocent victim. I was going to be the one who stood tall, who refused to be manipulated anymore. I knew I'd probably get some backlash from her, maybe even from others, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd taken back my life, and I'd made her face the consequences of her actions. In the midst of all this, I started focusing on myself. I went to the gym more regularly, reconnected with old friends, and started planning my next steps. I knew I'd never forget what she did, but I also knew I couldn't let her define my future. She'd lost me, and I was still here, stronger than ever. But I wasn't done yet. I had one more move to make, a final act that would seal everything and send her a clear message. The plan was simple but effective. I was going to file for a clean divorce, cut all ties, and leave her with nothing but her guilt. I was going to make sure she understood that betrayal has a price, that her lies and deception had consequences she couldn't escape. And when I handed over the final papers, I'd do it with a sense of closure I'd been craving. Because at the end of the day, the real revenge wasn't about hurting her physically or publicly humiliating her. It was about reclaiming my dignity, standing tall, and walking away with my head held high. That's exactly what I was going to do. The day I went to the courthouse to finalize everything felt surreal. I didn't let her see me nervous, though, no way. I had spent weeks preparing, making sure every detail was in order. I wanted this to be clean, decisive. No dragging things out, no giving her any room to manipulate or guilt me into changing my mind. I'd already made up my mind. I was done with her lies, her betrayal, her deception. Now I just needed to walk out of that office with the papers signed, the chapter closed. I arrived early, the cold air biting into my skin as I waited outside. My palms were sweaty, but my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I was going to do when I handed over the documents. I'd keep it simple. No drama, no anger, just the facts. I'd make sure she understood this was final. I had already made up my mind I'd never go back to that false life we'd been living. Finally, I was called in. Sitting across from the clerk, I signed my name with a steady hand, feeling the weight of everything I'd been through. When I handed her the papers, I looked her in the eyes. "This is it," I said softly. "It's over. You made your choice and I'm moving on." She looked at me, tears pooling in her eyes, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Can we talk just one more chance?" "No," I interrupted, voice firm. "You lost that chance the day you lied, cheated, and betrayed me. I gave you years of trust and you threw it all away for some fleeting moment with Mark. I won't be part of your pity party anymore. This is the end." I handed her the final copy, and she stared at it like it was a poison pill. Outside, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with anger. The papers were in my hands and the burden of that betrayal finally lifted. I walked out of the courthouse, the sun hitting my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a true sense of closure. The aftermath was a whirlwind. I kept my distance from Lisa, refusing to engage in any of her attempts to guilt me back or manipulate the situation. I knew she'd try, but I was done playing her game. I focused on rebuilding my life, spending more time with the kids, working on myself, and steadily moving forward. One thing I did was cut off all contact with her completely. No texts, no calls, no social media stalking, nothing. I needed to prove to myself that I could live without her, that I didn't need her approval or validation anymore. It wasn't easy, but I was determined. I wanted her to feel the emptiness that her lies had created. Eventually, I started seeing a counselor, someone to help me process everything. I learned that it was okay to feel angry, to feel broken, but that I also had to forgive myself for staying too long, for ignoring those subtle red flags. I realized that I'd given her enough of my life, enough of my trust, and now it was time to reclaim what was mine. Looking back, I know I did the right thing. The revenge wasn't about hurting her physically or humiliating her publicly, though part of me wanted to. It was about ending the lie, cutting her out of my life, and showing her that betrayal has consequences. I took my power back, and I refused to let her ruin what's left of my life. My advice: when you see the red flags, don't ignore them. Gather your evidence, plan your exit, and don't be afraid to cut ties. Trust me, walking away with your dignity intact is the greatest revenge you can give yourself. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is simply say goodbye and walk into a new life, free from the deception, shame, and heartbreak. The last few months have been a whirlwind of emotions, but I finally feel like I've closed that chapter of my life in a way that brings me peace. Walking into that courthouse, signing those papers, and walking out with a sense of finality was more than just legal formalities. It was a rebirth. I can't say I've stopped feeling all the pain, but I've certainly learned how to carry it differently, less like a weight and more like a reminder of what I've survived. Since then, I've managed to rebuild parts of myself I thought I'd lost. The kids are doing better, and I've found a new rhythm. I've started dating again, cautiously, but with a newfound sense of self-awareness. I refuse to be blind again. I know what red flags look like now, and I see the importance. of trusting my gut. Looking back, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned from all of this is that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought, more resilient than I believed, and that sometimes the only way to truly take control is to cut out what's toxic and move forward. Revenge, I found, wasn't about revenge at all. It was about reclaiming my dignity and peace of mind. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the small red flags, they're warnings. Gather your evidence, stay calm, and plan your escape. The pain will hurt, yes, but it's temporary. And once you do walk away, remember that the power was always in your hands. You don't have to stay trapped in a lie. You have the strength to start fresh, to rebuild what's broken, and to find happiness again, without the weight of betrayal hanging over you. Today, I'm choosing to believe that I'm better off without her. Because no matter how much it hurts to let go, it's always better than living in a lie. And I know now that being true to myself is the greatest form of revenge of all.